Okay, so the first tool in my top 6 hard surface tools is beveling. Yeah, so as you can see, I'm just scaling down this standard cube to get it the rough shape of this Playdate device. But as we look at the reference materials, you can see that the corners are rounded, right? And that is where bevel comes in. So to prepare this cube for beveling, first we need to hit Control A and hit Scale on the menu. This ensures that it's 1-to-1 scale. And then select all of the edges, hit 2 to get into edge mode inside of edit mode, edge selection mode, and then hit Command B and start to move your mouse. Then to add more detail, you just go ahead and scroll up with your mouse, and then that will add more fidelity, more segments to those edges. Scroll down to back it up. So you see I'm gonna do it one more time because I decided bevel was a little too large. So that gives us the nice rounded shape of our Playdate device. Now, obviously on all physical objects, there's going to be some real subtle bevels on the other edges, so it's not completely sharp. Now, we've got to avoid doing that at this point because we're going to add that later. Next up is Extrude. Now, this is something we use all the time. So you want to go into face selection mode, select one of the faces of the object that you want to extrude, and then hit L to select all the linked, and then hit E to extrude that object down and give it thickness. So that's, modeling 101. Yeah, I'm sure you all know that. Okay, next up is the loop cut. So you can see I'm working with the crank arm here, and what I need to do is cut into the end of it to allow for an area for the hinge piece to live. To execute the loop cut, hit Command R, get a slice in there, and then I just go ahead and select that, bevel it, Command B, use the scroll wheel to bring it down to only a single segment in my bevel, and then I'll just use X to remove all those faces. Then I'm left with this void thanks to the loop cut. Then I just go around, select the individual points, hit F to create polygons, and then holding down Option and clicking on the edge, I can select that whole edge loop, hit F, and we've got that area closed off. And now for section 4, I'm calling this modifiers in general, but it's broken up into multiple different modifiers. So first off is Boolean, and I've got multiple objects that I want to subtract from this main body of the Playdate device. So selecting all those together, hit Command J, and now it's a single object that I'm going to rename subtract or subtraction. And then selecting the body, go ahead and add a modifier, choose Boolean, then make sure it's on difference. Using the eyedropper tool, I'm going to go ahead and select that subtraction option, and boom, we've got a multiple holes cut from our body. And now I've hidden the individual pieces by just hitting the slash button to select the body, and I can see where those cuts have been made. And you might have to tweak with some settings to ensure that every hole has been subtracted. The next part of modifiers is the bevel. Now, this is different from the non-modifier version. Bevel modifier, similar to how we added the Boolean modifier, and then play with the amount, the angle. You want to turn off clamp override, all that good stuff. And you can see it is adding a bevel, but looking at my reference, I can see that's not quite as sharp as I would like. So I continue to play with the number of segments, the amount, things like that. And ultimately, what I end up doing is getting into edit mode here, and then looking at the topology, trying to see, is this an issue with my bevel modifier, or the subdivision surface modifier just is smoothing things out too much. And we'll talk about the Sub-D modifier here shortly. But what I'm going to go ahead and do at this point is, using Command R, I'm going to cut in some additional loop cuts, and boom, that sharpens it right up. Now on to the array modifier. Go ahead and add that just like we did the previous modifiers. We're going to change the factor to the Y factor, I believe. Yeah, and we're going to space it out to about -1.5. Change the count to get the right number of objects. I think 10 or 11 is going to be about right for what I'm doing here. And then, I want to delete some of these kind of stand-in placeholder cylinders. Then I'm going to Shift D to duplicate this whole object, which includes the array modifier still. And referring to my reference, I can see that looks like there's 3 columns of these holes, and that middle one needs an extra object to kind of balance everything out. And then after I'm happy with the positioning of everything, you can obviously go ahead and select all 3 of those array shapes and scale them down so that they fit nicely in that space allowed. And then the last modifier that I'm always using is the Sub-D or subdivision surface modifier. And you can see we're working with the D-pad here, and it has, a Boolean modifier on it. We want to go ahead and add a subdivision surface modifier. And it looks like there's a bevel modifier on there as well. When I ran that Sub-D surface, everything got too squishy. So I've got to get into edit mode, add some additional loop cuts, just like we did before. So you can see how these tools are building on top of each other. Here I'm going to select multiple shapes, hit I for an inset, which is another tool that we could have totally thrown on this list. Let me know if you have some tools that you feel like I missed that should have been in this top 6. I felt like inset I didn't use quite as much as these others, so maybe it's number 7, right? But we'll go ahead and continue to add a few more loop cuts just to tighten up this D-pad, give it the general shape that we're looking for. And ultimately, I believe I end up adjusting the position of some of these. And that's a big part of the process, is trying something, looking at it, making those modifiers visible again, seeing, did that solve my problem? Did I go too far? How can I adjust? It's not just a linear process that you're constantly moving forward and not going back to readjust. So back in object mode, I can see what's going on a little better, and I think we've got a better place to start here. Let's increase the number of subdivs. You can see the edges start to break apart, have some issues at different subdivision levels, and using this process alone of just modifiers a lot of times won't get you all the way there. You can see I've been able to clean it up quite a bit. I actually added an additional subdivision surface modifier at the bottom of the modifier stack. But you'll see in the final step, I'll take this D-pad and show you, kind of what needs to happen to really dial it in. Now on to the knife tool. So sticking with this D-pad, I decided that this is a pretty complicated piece, and you can see kind of this messy looking mesh here at the top of the D-pad, which was created, with the Boolean modifier. I went ahead and applied the modifier, so now it's just a single shape, and what I want to do is clean up the topology here on this top piece. So initially what I'm going to do, and we'll get to the knife tool here shortly, but a lot of times to get to that point, you're doing a little work to prepare your model for that. And so I'm going to go ahead and go into side mode here and use my marquee selection tool, and then just draw a square or a marquee around the top to select all those faces at the top. Then hit X, dissolve faces, and that creates one giant N-gon essentially at the top of this D-pad. Now, again, we're preparing this model. We've got way too many points around the edges here, so we're going to need to clean that up. Again, we're going to move into our side view, the orthographic view of the D-pad, make a selection like before, and then with all of that selected, I'm going to hit X and select limited dissolve. Then that gets rid of the majority of those extra vertices. I am kind of hunting around to make sure I got them all, and then just dissolving any of those vertices by hitting X and then dissolve vertices. Now that that's cleaned up a bit, we're going to go ahead and hit 3 to go into face mode and select our one giant big N-gon at the top. Hit I to inset that shape, and then that shows us that things are looking much cleaner. We don't have any stray vertices that created edges we didn't want. And here we are, knife mode. Hit K, and the beautiful thing is that snaps to your geometry. And then after you've created a slice, hit enter. Sometimes you might not see it just because of the way this big N-gon is looking. That edge is there, but it's just kind of hidden. And so if we hit 3 and select the individual polys, you can see that they are indeed cut there. So back to knife, the K tool, hit enter to commit that cut. K again. And I think there's a way to not have to keep hitting K and do multiple cuts, but sometimes it's hard to remember every single shortcut. So I'm just doing it the brute force way, adding in cuts one at a time and looking at the topology. The nice thing is this knife tool automatically welds the vertices together, so it's not like we're getting duplicate verts on top of each other. Just go ahead and kind of speed through the remainder of these cuts. And once we get those done, we can move on. And that is going to be a clean looking D-pad. So looking at that in this next step, you can see how this D-pad's a lot better looking. I've added materials and different things, but the point that I want to make here is that your final tool in creating beautiful hard surface models in Blender is attention to detail, and it's your determination, your grit, your willingness to push forward, to look at the individual pieces, to find areas that could be improved. You can see, I'm just noticing from way back at my Boolean stage, for some reason the D-pad and buttons and maybe some other areas, the Boolean didn't work and it didn't punch a hole through there. So I'm trying to debug it, go through one thing at a time. Do I need to extend, scale up this shape a little better for the Boolean to kind of recognize it? No, that didn't do it. Okay, solo it. Yeah, that D-pad is definitely not being cut out, but looks like everything else is. So what to do? It could be a combination of different things. Could be, we're going to keep playing with this. Let's switch it to fast instead of detail, and look, now we have all those holes punched through and it looks pretty good. So in this case, fast is probably the way to go. Just inspecting everything once again, duplicate that bevel, and this is again part of the detailing phase. Then I'm going to take the new bevel and bring it down to the bottom of the stack so that it applies a bevel after the Boolean process as well. This gives us those nice rounded edges on these areas that we've created the bool. And it's not perfect when you get up close, and the edges have some little imperfections, but depending on how you're going to use the model, that may work for you. Yep, looks like exact. It's still not cutting that out, so we'll stick with simple solution, or the fast solution. And just like we did in the last step with the knife, you can apply that same thinking here if you really want a perfect model. It's all about deciding what you have time for and how it's going to be used. So if I were to commit or apply all of these modifiers and then go in and use the knife tool and create perfect topology for everything, and then apply just the bevel and subdivision modifier at the end, yeah, it's going to be a lot cleaner, no question. So just remember that. And this tutorial wasn't meant to be, hey, this is how you create this exact device, and it's on modeling. That's why I didn't go through the process of materials and rendering and all of that. I just wanted to take it that far so that you could see the modeling side of things shine a bit more. This isn't a complete model either. I didn't do the back of it. I didn't apply any textures. I just have materials. If you look at the reference, there's something that we might want to put on the screen. There's buttons have A and B printed on them. So if you're interested in a complete end-to-end tutorial on how to create this Playdate device, hit me up in the comments, let me know. I'll happily create that video, that tutorial. And if you found this valuable, please like, subscribe, engage with the content. That's always super helpful. And again, thank you for your time and your support. And until next time, just keep on creating.